following program on Derana 24 is classified for general audience. It is intended for all ages. It contains little or no violence, no strong language, and little or no sexual dialogue or situations.
Tonight, we discuss the latest developments surrounding the online safety bill and its amendments. How do global events reflect on this legislature and its application in Sri Lanka? A very good evening and thank you for joining us on yet another episode of Law, Land and Liberty, where we bring to you key legal topics and break it down for the layman. Now tonight's topic is one that we have touched briefly prior, just when it was developing, and now we've seen some recent developments as well, and that's on the online safety bill. We've seen talks about amendments coming up, and also with the current situation where online information has caused serious riots and serious unrest among the public in countries worldwide. It's very important for us to look into our own online security legislature and see if there's censorship or if there's protection going around. And to talk about this, we have someone that's not a new face on the show, and that is President's Counsel Prasantha Alwis. Sir, thank you very much for taking the time to actually once again come into our studios and explain to our viewers about the recent developments and also the significance of the online safety bill. Thank you very much, sir.
Privileged.
And now to get into the specifics of the topic before we go in, here's a little bit of a breakdown. We're going to be touching on the recent developments to the legislature that we have seen come up, and next we'll be talking about the current context when it comes to Sri Lanka and also across the globe and how it affects you and me. And finally, we'll be talking about the future of safety online and this legislature. All right, well, without any further ado, let's get right into the nitty-gritties of this topic. We have a lot to unpack when it comes to the developments as well. Once again, sir, thank you very much for taking the time. There is a lot of ground for us to cover, specifically when it comes to the updates. But before we get into the updates, sir, could you give our viewers at home a little bit of a basic overall understanding about what exactly the online safety bill specifies and what it's about?
Yes, online safety bill was approved by the Parliament and it was signed by the Speaker on the 1st of February 2024, and therefore now it's a law in this country. But then there were certain concerns that Supreme Court amendments were not done at the committee stage, and because I have to very categorically say, Anuradhi, that any law that has to come in which affect people, there must be consultation with the stakeholders, like Derana and so many others who are involved with this process. But it was not done. And there was so much of concern, so much of issues that came up. So subsequent to the law, there was a lot of grievances, a lot of complaints, like the President of the UN Human Rights Commission said that it has a chilling effect on freedom of expression. It went to that level, and therefore finally now the amendments are gazetted. So a lot of concerns were made, a lot of issues were raised whether the amendments suggested by the Supreme Court is in the law, and there is a debate on that. So that's a bit of a controversial area at this moment. But we have to understand that before this law came into being, we had penal code covering this aspect in a narrow sense. But more than that, there was the computer crimes law, which was in existence from 2007. So anything to do with the computer means even our mobile, that includes the mobile phone, could be covered in most of the offences. So we had it from 2007, that is 17 years ago. So we have a kind of a law, that is Computer Crimes Act, and the online safety bill sometimes overlapping.
Right. Sir, but now that you've mentioned that we have overlaps in the legislature when it comes to already existing pieces of law that we have been putting into use since all the way back since 2007 in itself, but what exactly sets the online safety bill apart from the rest of the legislature that is in existence?
Yes. Now, if you take the Computer Crimes Act, it was about hacking a computer, or more specifically about information being dragged out of the computer. That kind of things were more limited to the computer. But this goes little more as the law, the word provides. It is about online safety. So it is the safety of the people. It should be that. Safety of the people, safety of the state, safety of all of us. That has to be covered. So this goes little more into detail. But some areas it overlaps, Anuradhi.
Right, exactly. I think you mentioned, sir, that it's the safety of the people, the safety of the person is at the forefront of this law. But there's been a lot of backlash, as you mentioned, relating to the actual putting into effect of this law as well. If you could, sir, explain to us exactly how online safety has changed since the introduction of such a law. We understand that it's fairly new, so we haven't really seen much of an action taken on the law. But where do you suggest this trajectory will take us with the implementation of this?
Yes, the law or the offences that they have created is very unique. Now, earlier, if you talk of harassment, Anuradhi, we had sexual harassment. It was limited to section 345, where you, by your gesture or assault, you have sexual harassment on a person. That would be there. But this goes very interestingly little more. It talks about harassment, not sexual only, about harassment using something private. Now that means somebody harasses me with using my birthday photograph, cutting a cake. Even that can come in. So actually this protects right to privacy. The other one, I will state the offences that is there.
Of course.
Like if a statement creates riots. Now the thing that you mentioned as at the introduction, what happened at Southport, where a person stabbed 4 girls, 3 dead. And the whole online communication was that this person, he's a Rwandan parent who are from Cardiff area, from England, but then they were told, the online propaganda was that it was a person who came in a boat, totally a different story. And therefore there was a debate with Elon Musk, whose port helps this Robinson, the leader who is a right-wing, who is anti-immigrant. So then the Prime Minister retorted back saying that you are at fault. So that kind of thing was never covered. A riot there against the state was covered very clearly with a death sentence, but not about riots there. So like that, there are like contempt of court, which is there in law. Here too there is contempt of court. So there is a bit of overlap there. Penal code very categorically has contempt of court. And the other one offences are online cheating. So if you use online for cheating, Anuradhi, there is offence. But there is in the penal code also cheating. If you cheat and get money or property delivered to you, same thing is used here. But here is very specific about online. And also by person impersonate, if you do it online. Now that is again, there is a penal code offence. But the interesting scenario is sentence is higher. Jail term is higher, the fine is higher than the penal code. So that's where these are the offences that they have stated in the online safety bill, very clearly focused on harassment, cheating, and very interestingly riots. And this law speaks of 2 interesting scenarios. That is, the first one is they declare a prohibited statement in online, what is there in the online. And also a statement called declared online location, like we declare national parks so that others can't go and do it. Likewise, there is very interesting 2 new dimensions that they have come up with. So that's where the commission decides that this statement is a prohibited statement. And therefore, they can recommend the internet servers to remove that thing or cease to access for the offenders. And that is possible. But if you repeat it 3 times, then that site becomes a declared online location. Now that's where the danger comes, Anuradhi. There even no one can financially support it. And if you financially support such an online location, which is now declared after prohibited 3 statements, then that's an offense. Now, that's interesting. It's like...
strike system.
Exactly. So this is the structure that they are working on, creating new offences, new situations under the online safety bill.
Right. In your opinion, sir, we just mentioned about the offences that are stated in the Act. Do you believe that the offences that are listed is adequate enough to cause enough of an enforcement of this legislature in the public sphere? Is it in any way as effective as you would intend it to be, or is there room for improvement?
If you're talking of the offences, or I call it in technical terms substantive law, what is the offence? Yes, certainly yes. Let me come up with a personal experience. Now, when the 20th Amendment was on, I was invited by the Sarvodaya and I did a discussion, and that was taken by Mr. Ranjan Ramanayaka. And in that program, starting from a basic criticism, that from where did this guy come from, to utter filth, which so much so my son was crying. Now, I have experienced that. Then I got information that certain groups are getting ready to attack us. And if you go to Facebook, you can see another Facebook with not Prasantha D. Alwis, Prasantha D. Alwis, with the same birthday. Now, when I complained to the Facebook, they said they can't remove, because it's another identity, so there can be Prasantha D. Alwis with the same birthday. Now, they were trying to use that to probably to attack, but then I had a counter move. In my normal Facebook account, I publicized the whole thing, and therefore it was I don't think they went on with that one. So I have gone through that kind of thing, and therefore I feel this is important, because in this kind of Facebook especially, or any for that matter, anything, fake accounts or without a name comes into play. That is my own experience as I stand. So this allows that to go into. And we have seen most of the private life of people are brought into light. I strongly believe as a person, my private is my private life, yours is yours and everyone's. That can't come into public unless it affects the people of this country. I would still make a caveat, unless it affects the people of this country. And therefore, this law is that sense, if you harass a person using public, private information, that becomes an offense, which I believe is a very progressive step forward to protect the privacy of the people. Already there is a case where Mr. Janaka Ratnayaka went to courts and filed a case and prevented his private things being used in the public terrain. So I think that's the first case under this Online Safety Act, where he went to the district court and got a stay order, which I think is a very progressive thing. So therefore, in my experience, the law as it is very, very important. We'll get to that later, whether the government can use it to fight the dissent, we can move on. But otherwise, as a person, as an individual, as a citizen, I strongly believe, Anuradhi, that this law is a step forward.
Exactly. It might not be a giant step forward, but it is progress in the right direction.
Of course.
And it's up to the public to actually understand that we have to foster such developments and not completely shut it down, which we do have to speak about. Specifically, you mentioned the dissent factor as well, involvement from governments. But before we get into that, before we go in for a short break, could you explain to us the commission that was mentioned in this act, and also the effectiveness of actually implementing this piece of legislature? Has there been progress on that front?
So far, this entire structure is based on a commission. If you take the Consumer Affairs Authority Act, the new authority that was established, I was a member of the first authority. Now that's the authority with the investigation arm and all that. Similarly, there was Right to Information Act that came into being in 2016. Now that commission is up and coming, rise. I mean, they here, I had to speak to Mr. Jagat Liyanarachi, who is they are a commissioner, and Kishali Pintu Javadan, a lawyer and a journalist. They are sitting sometimes appeal about 200 a day. So though it is not there in the public domain, that's the moment I realized, wow, it is amazing. Right? People are getting information which is a fundamental right of Article 16 that was brought in. So it is in a very short period of time, from 2022 to now, 2 years, right to Information Commission has been very vibrant. So I am praying and hoping that this commission is appointed, hopefully maybe after the elections, and then it start kicking. And then we can see as it progress, I believe this can be a very positive way forward.
Exactly. So we haven't seen a lot of practical application, but there is potential for this legislature to truly be supporting the public and also the protection of the public.
Absolutely.
I believe that's the perfect note for us to conclude this segment on. We do have to completely touch on a different area that is stigmatized by the public, which is on the censorship issue relating to pieces of legislation that's deployed by the government, and also to regional tensions that we have seen relating to online safety and misinformation spreading, as well as unrest. But before we get into any of these specifics, let's take a very short commercial break. You're watching Law, Land and Liberty. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Law, Land and Liberty. We're in conversation with President's Counsel Prasantha Alwis, and we were talking about the online safety bill and its most recent developments. So I believe we covered a lot of ground in the previous segment in relation to global tensions as well, and how the online safety bill in Sri Lanka is actually hoping to foster a better environment of protection for the general public in Sri Lanka. But just before we left off, you mentioned the stigma that is currently circulating in the public sphere, which is the factor of dissent by governments, and also the issue of censorship that a lot of individuals are concerned about. Is this law actually taking away our freedom of expression, freedom of speech? Does it completely undermine our fundamental rights? There was a lot of conversation relating to that, and also we saw the amendments come in through such a conversation as well. So could you please explain to us what you believe are the biggest challenges when it comes to approaching this bill, and where the stigma actually stems from?
Yes, I think the fear, the natural fear came, Anuradi, because we had Aragalaya, people wanted a system change, and there is a suppression of protest movement, which is justified by saying it is for the economy's sake. They get a court order to stop protest. So in that kind of a backdrop, when this law came into being, with the elections pending and elections sometime postponed, people feel naturally that this is an oppressive law that has been brought in to suppress the freedom, because we have to understand the Aragalaya or the struggle, everything stemmed from online. I mean, that was the major force, like Bangladesh. The whole riots were led by young people, the whole thing like Sri Lanka, and so Sheikh Hasina had to leave. So that kind of scenario made people feel that this law is brought for the purpose just to suppress freedom of expression, suppress people's views. So it is a quite justified view that people, I believe it's a very justified view. So because for the simple reason the commission is appointed by the president, of course through the Constitutional Council, and president can remove them. So the law very categorically says it has to be from the legal field, the corporate governance, technology field, and it covers the area. Whether a true, experts are not always independent. This kind of commissions, any commission for that matter, has to be independent of politics. So the people had a fear, which is a natural fear and a justified fear, that this appointment to the commission would be basically on political basis. And therefore, a good example, there is a clause, if it is national security, public health, public order, the commission can prohibit such statement. Now that's a very wide area. I repeat again, national security, public order, health, it's a area that can't be defined. What is national security? Who decides that? So when the commission has to decide that and prohibit those statements, that naturally had a feel there. So therefore, naturally, the people felt that it is oppressive. Because I strongly believe if Bangladesh, there was absolute freedom of online and a free discussion, this wouldn't have happened. Because people would rather prefer, like India, most of the time, to have a free debate, free arguments. Moment you have that, moment you have media like this, moment you express views and different views can be seen through the main medias, people feel they don't get onto street, they can fight it through media and information. So I think strongly that is there, but people don't understand there are safeguards. That is where you simply can't, except for prohibition on those statements that I mentioned, on national security, public health and public order, to make it effective, it has to go through courts. Repeat again, it has to go to courts. And people can go to courts, to the magistrate court. The commission can go to the magistrate court. And people can ask for what are the source that is done. And district court, you can ask for who has put this information. And also the court system allows to get damages. So there is a legal process. And if there is something called administrative law, Anuradhi, where if the decision is not violating natural justice, that is, if the decision of this, all this were done without giving a hearing to the other side, that can be struck off. We call it audi alteram partem. I mean, you have to give a hearing to an aggrieved party of your decision. And you can't hear your own case, nemo jude ex causa. Those are the two basic natural justice principles where the state has to take decisions. So that coverage is there. And if anyone violates the law, we call it ultra vires in a Latin term, then you can still question with a writ. And if your fundamental rights is violated, because that's there in the freedom of expression under Article 14, and many other articles like right to information too in Article 16, still you can go to the Supreme Court saying that you have breached your fundamental rights. So these things are there. The safeguard for individuals against the commission. A commission, of course, cannot be prosecuted or whatever, but if they take these decisions, because after all the state, the executive or the machinery, that can be questioned. There is no bar from anyone going on those lines that I explained, Anuradhi, to courts to get a writ and quash the order, or to get a declaration that the fundamental rights have been violated.
Exactly. I think I'd like to pry a little bit into that area specifically. So when it comes to judicial oversight, just how significant would that kind of impact be for this kind of legislature? Because, of course, with the involvement of the courts, we understand that we are to be deserved some sort of justice and some sort of fairness in the proceedings. Do you believe that these powers are adequately balanced when it comes to this law?
Of course. As I said before, from year 2018, there was a bit of a checkered past. But we have proven beyond doubt that the highest court, that is called the superior courts, and the lower courts, even during the stressful period of Aragalaya, when a prime minister was removed and another one was put in, that was in 2018. And to date, the court has been the guardian of the people. That I will say proudly as a lawyer. I repeat again, I say it proudly as a lawyer. That's where I oppose anyone in the cover of the parliament comes and criticizes and says, I don't abide by the case, courts. Right, where the president said so, the prime minister said so, that they will not be bound by court, and some minister of justice comes and says and criticizes judges. Now that is what the parliament did. So they undermine the independence of the judiciary. So in that kind of a context, right, the safeguard of the court system is lost. Now people at this moment has the highest respect and the highest faith in there. As we can explain, there is efficiency, there is a problem. how long a case is heard. It is same in this scenario, because it gives you 14 days and many other things. Then the harm is done. Under the online actor, you have to go to courts, there is 14 days, and then you can give an answer in 14 days. Like that, there is a time period. But imagine even 14 days, harm to a person in online is done. Riot can happen. So that kind of a scenario, there is a problem as to efficiency, doing the things right.
Exactly.
But we are doing the right thing, effectiveness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Despite the effectiveness, we've had to cut down with balancing on the efficiency, specifically considering the fact that the internet age moves not in days, but in minutes and seconds as well. I think, sir, I unfortunately had to interrupt you, but I believe you were getting to it. The biggest weaknesses that you see, biggest lapses you see in this legislature, if you could explain to our viewers exactly where you might see shortcomings in this bill.
The shortcomings, as I said before, is the effectiveness. Now, the Computer Crimes Act in 2007 specifies that there must be experts, and that has to be gazetted. Now, still it has not been done. Imagine. But here too, because if you take the online, I personally am not expert. I'm a still old-fashioned guy. Unlike you and rather your generation, right? So, in that kind of a context, if you take experts has to be brought in. And when the experts are not gazetted in the law of 2007 properly with a system, and so therefore, and even CERT, we have a system now, computer emergency, emergency, I'll get the exact word, readiness team, CERT, that is there at the BMICH, where you can complain on anything cyber. So that system is there, but in efficiency, as you said, it's happening fast. Efficiency, the knowledge of the people to get to CERT, which is there, and the way how they should proceed, knowledge, these are killing the whole thing for a long period of time. So we have not got the structure right, but the law is superb now. If they want to search and seize a property, this authority or the commission has to go with the police, because we have to understand it is the Sri Lanka police who is entitled to be public security. National security is Army, Navy, Air Force, the three armed forces. But if you take the public security, it's them. So that element is linked here beautifully. But then there is an investigation team. We have to get a very effective, efficient investigation team, as you said. So they have to be empowered. Now we have a bribery commission. But you and I know, hardly there is no machinery, the expertise to catch the people who are fraudulent, who are bribery takers in a very sophisticated manner. Good old days, a Grama Sevaka will take 50 rupees or whatever it is, and you trap him and you catch him, right? But today's context is online. So, but then there is sadly lacking expertise and the proper system of investigators to crack. That's the problem with bribery. So same fate will come in here too, because the government must spend resources on resources, money, the infrastructure, the people to develop this. So that is the thing that I've seen in the Computer Crimes Act and other related ones. But as you know, freedom of information, you don't need much IT and expertise. So that is why I believe with the enthusiasm of the commissioners and the team, that is running properly, because you don't need such a sophistication. But as the word denotes, online security requires absolute technological knowledge. But I am having hope. I mean, when we had this Aragalaya at the end of it, our country people created the QR code. We have the capacity. Only the will of the political leadership. Our Sri Lankans are best in IT. I mean, this QR code that I mentioned is one and only in the world. So we can create it if they are empowered to do so. Now that has to come in, the political willpower to implement this law.
Exactly, sir. And picking up where you left off, sir, when it comes to the empowerment and also the enabling of furthering our technological advancement and also to thereby further the online safety bill and its effectiveness, what are the steps that have to be taken when it comes to fostering this environment in Sri Lanka?
We have to create this as importance. Several new laws were brought in, which are good. I mean, there are so many laws. So it should not be merely a law. As I said, first of all, the commission has to be appointed. And they have to be people who are respected in the field, whom people have faith, and from there it flows. Now, when the Consumer Affairs Authority was brought in, I was there. We were very passionate because we were the first to do it. So we put our whole heart and soul into it. So that kind of people have to come in. And then structure put in. It won't take much time or things. But sadly, now the elections are on. I don't think the emphasis till the election ends would be on this. So soon after that, I think the law has to be taken and go on to protect the people of this country.
Exactly. We have come to time in this segment as well. We do have to talk about the future of the online safety bill and also the future of online safety in Sri Lanka, and also how to actually denote the stigmas and actually interact with this legislature for the betterment of our people. But before we get into any of those specifics on future problems and also development, let's take a very short commercial break. You're watching Law, Land and Liberty. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Law, Land and Liberty. We're in our final segment in discussion with President's Counsel Prasantha Alwis. Thank you very much for the previous two segments. We covered a lot of information and a lot of ground relating to the online safety bill and its development, as well as key lapses that we have seen that needs to be filled. I think since this is our final segment, it's important for us to, now that we've looked prospectively as well retrospectively, we have to look a little bit into the future. When it comes to the future, before we get into any of those specifics on how to further this legislature, I believe it's important for us to touch on a little bit of a global context. So do you believe that with the introduction with these new legislatures, for example, the online safety bill, are we reaching a point where we can stand toe-to-toe with global standards for safety and security online?
Of course. Now, the data protection law came in recently, and it will be implemented next year. So that gives you protection of data, and that means, say, the information of you in the bank can't go out. Your name or whatever can't be given to another vendor to canvass you. So that kind of thing is very there, almost there. Now, as we saw, Right to Information Act, Data Protection Act was enacted after long deliberation. Any law before enactment has to be discussed among the stakeholders, Anuradhi. People must be given views. I mean, if they put a basic draft, this kind of discussion must take place, ideas has to be flown in, and the people then will feel this is ours. Now, amendments are gazetted, but then I strongly believe that people interaction is very vital, so the law becomes ours. Because, as I said before, we have all the laws that is there to your question compared to the world. So, in that kind of a context, I think we are well ahead. But then, any amendments that will get the fear out or answer the people who are human rights activists and people of this country has to be done very deliberately with a long discussion and a very, very thoughtful discussion with all stakeholders. I believe that's the way forward.
Exactly.
But this is a good law.
So the foundation is consistent and it's solid.
Yes.
We need to build upon it with the amendments and the changes that we bring in. In that context, the gazetted amendments, do you believe that such changes, if we continue to consistently keep at it and evolve, will the online safety bill become a pillar of protection of people's democracy in Sri Lanka, or do you believe that we have to come up with just much more legislatures in relation and in connection to it and cause a little bit of a web scenario?
Yes. Now, laws is very important to put it in black and white. But sadly, except for these riots, which is by the right wing, if you take the parliament, there is no constitution. It's an unwritten constitution. It's in the spirit of people, spirit of the threshold. Good example, just to give you an example, the law has to be abided by. Now, if you take the COVID period, when we saw Duke of Edinburgh's death, the wife, who was the queen in the cathedral, was all alone, completely abiding by the constitution. And the Prime Minister did not go attend the funeral, gave that slot to somebody else. So likewise, they abide by the constitution. Now, good example, for a minister for violating COVID rules, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, resigns at the peak of the popularity. Because it is in the system, heart and system, it's the heart and in the blood, the feel, the spirit of the people. Sadly, in Sri Lanka, it is not so. After 1987, when Mr. Nisanka Wijeratne resigned, when there was riots in the prison, where the Tamil people were killed of prisoners, that's the last time a minister resigned. I'm just striking a point that it is in the spirit, the heart, the feel of the people that was what matters. So online safety bill, paper-wise, we can develop. But the people who are using the online has to have this in their system, that you should not harass people, you should not use this for riots. Now, spirit of the law has to go to people. How does it happen? Education, like this institution, getting people to know, getting to the world, to every child even, the importance of the law, why it is important. It is important for every citizen of this country. So this education and this whole thing, I strongly believe is the spirit of the law that matters, not the black and white law. Because we found Constitution in the last few days, they're trying to get through the Constitution, find loopholes, find where they can just go through, rather than working on the spirit of the Constitution. So we should work on the spirit of the Online Act, Security Act. That is what is lacking in Sri Lanka.
Exactly. Of course, we need to really instill in ourselves the integrity of our constitution and to ensure that we abide uprightly by the laws and make sure that there is no malicious intent and manipulation of the legislature that we have been bestowed with. Sir, I think it's important for us, since we are nearing the end of the discussion, in your opinion, when it comes to the future of this legislature, of this act, do you believe that this act will end up being more of a collaborative part of all the other existing online related legislatures, or do you believe it will be more of a standalone piece of legislation?
This is not standalone, it is connected, because the Criminal Procedure Code applies. This is a bailable offence, interestingly, so the police can give bail, and so it is very lenient. There is no minimum sentence. There is a minimum sentence is a mandatory sentence. So it gives a wide discretion to courts to give the sentence. It even can be warning and discharge. It can be even a suspended sentence. So it leaves a wide room involved in the Code of Criminal Procedure Code, the Bail Act. All those laws are brought in with this law very specifically. So it is not a standalone. This is a very compact with other laws, and I would say the punishment are not that stringent like the ICCPR Act, where there is a minimum sentence, where there is no bail at all. So this is much more a lenient, a very free kind of a law, which involves the other major common laws of our country.
And is that a best case scenario for our people, sir?
Of course, of course. I strongly don't believe a harsh punishment in the first place. It has to be some punishment, leaving a very absolute discretion to court to decide with the facts of the case, rather than having a threshold of a minimum sentence. That is not what I personally don't advocate that. I believe in a judicial discretion in sentencing.
Of course, and also I believe that would contribute, that kind of lenience and also that kind of flexibility would contribute to destigmatizing this piece of legislature. Is that right, sir?
Exactly. So this is not a draconian law as it is pointed out. It's a very people-friendly law, even for the offender, because you have to have 3 prohibited statements to get your online thing. So before 3 statements, you can go to courts if there is a violation of the law, as I mentioned before, of writs or fundamental rights. So there are so many room available before this declaration comes in as a online declaration which is prohibits even financing. So in that kind of a context, to me, it's a people-friendly one, which we should nourish. It is the people who uses it that can be draconian. I mean, any discussion is that, no, Anuradhi. When a judge is given a discussion and he gives a maximum punishment to his whims and fancies, system can't be blamed, or for that matter, anyone. So it is, as I said before, it is the spirit that matters. It is the individuals that matters, that runs any organization and a system.
Right, exactly. And sir, I think because we are nearing the end of this discussion, it's important for us to understand exactly what role the public can play in furthering this piece of legislature and also establishing this piece of legislature, properly giving it a foundation where it can be a reliable instrument that we can actually bank on when it comes to times of distress. What can the public do, sir?
Yes. The other extreme that is that the government can use this to suppress people's views. But majority part of the law is for the people. So rather than being negative and rather than loving state machinery to use this as an oppressive law, we should make it like the right to information as a positive thing. So we must use this law to make complaints about their online harassment and keep on this as a people's law, rather than allowing that to be left for only to be used as a weapon by the state. That's about the game plan we should do, as citizens do. We should take the law into our hands, like the Consumer Affairs Authority Act. If the people are alert, and if the consumers are alert, then the law becomes alive, law becomes active. So it is, online security bill is a good law, and it is us citizens to make it active, very positively in favor of the people. Rather than allowing that to be used by the state, they can use it for oppressive purposes.
Exactly. We have to take ownership of the legislature that has been granted to us in order to make sure that there is no malicious use and there is no manipulation.
Absolutely.
But before we end off this discussion, sir, is there any sort of comments that you can leave relating to the manipulation of this law by the public? Because we could see a lot of individuals trying to actually garner unauthorized advantage through such a legislature. What are your thoughts on this, sir?
Of course, any law can be manipulated. Anything can be manipulated. So that's why the judicial system is there. That's why a system makes it check and balances. So that's a way forward. I can make a false complaint against you. I mean, then the legal system must take over. So there can be manipulations. Anything is possible. But then the law is very clear and the process is very clear. So the law will not allow that to manipulate. Again, I repeat, there is criminal procedure code applies. So we are supposed to follow that law.
Right, exactly. It's not foolproof, but it's not completely being able to be manipulated.
Nothing is foolproof, not in life. Yes.
So while there are certain lapses, but it is relatively much tighter stronghold in comparison to anything else that we could have opted for in relation to safety online. Sure. We have come to the end of this discussion, sir. Before we leave off, if there is any piece of advice that you could give to our viewers in relation to interacting with this bill in the future, if you could, please.
Yeah, my comment or my advice is forgetting not only this law, for that matter, any law, consumer affairs, this right to information, we must become active citizens. What happens is we will now go on the 21st of September, we vote and we leave. And we say, okay, let the government run. Now that can't be done. In consumer affairs, I put it everything, right to information. You have to ask people the information, that is the right given by the law. And similarly, online safety bill, people has to get activated and becomes a citizen's country, not the politician's country. That's a message that I like to drive.
Exactly. We have to take ownership. We have to take responsibility for the rights that have been granted to us, the rights that we actively use and are protected by, specifically when it comes to these new pieces of legislature that we have seen popping up in recent times in increasing frequencies as well, and also just how much of our content and our lives are actually related and intertwined with being online as well. So it's important for us to understand that this bill, in a way, is one of our biggest protectors if we choose to utilize it appropriately. Well, unfortunately, sir, our time here with you today has come to an end. Thank you very much for taking the time to actually enlighten our viewers on this topic. It has been quite a topic that we have to really break into. I believe with the amendments that are coming in and with the developments, we will have to have you back in the studio to actually explain to our viewers just how significant the evolution of this bill is. So thank you very much, sir, for taking the time.
Privileged to be here.
All right, well, security on the internet is not only essential for privacy, but it is also necessary to prevent the spreading of misinformation and causing mass unrest among the public. And towards that purpose, this act plays a major role. We leave you tonight with the words of cryptographer Bruce Schneider. Online security is not an absolute, but a process. That is all we have for you tonight on Law, Land and Liberty. If you had missed any of today's programs, you can always rewatch by catching us on our YouTube page, youtube.com/otherderana English. Thank you very much for watching. Have a good night.